Welcome to Slayer the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, let's discuss the Cars and their first album. I'm going to warn you here, I'm on a melodic rock kick, so you may get some videos like this. I've always been a fan of melodic radio rock, you know, that kind of late 70s, early 80s stuff with some keyboards in it, and you know, just very well written rock stuff. The Cars, you know, they're one of these bands that I guess you'd say they're one of the originators of the new wave sound. You know, there is guitars in here, but it's certainly, you know, you're not getting the same amount of guitars as you would on a Van Halen, you know, album. But the guitars are there. There is a lot of keyboards and everything in it, and I suppose that's where it draws it towards the new wave type of stuff. But I appreciate this because it sort of straddles that line between 70s rock and 80s rock and sort of that new wave keyboardy sound. And when I think of bands from the 80s, big bands from the 80s, MTV type bands, you know, this is one of the bands that I think of. And interestingly enough, this album, I was surprised when I first saw it. I just always assumed that this came out in the 80s because it's such an 80s sounding record. But this actually came out in 1978. So this is ahead of its time for this kind of sound that we would hear in the 80s with the new wave bands and with the MTV bands. And I've just always loved this record. It is just full of hit songs. It's almost like the Boston album, you know, the first Boston album, where like practically every song on this album has gotten played on classic rock radio. I think the production on it is just absolutely fantastic. It is so well done, very, you know, you can hear everything. It's very clean. It's just a classic, you know, kind of late 70s, early 80s production. It doesn't sound at all dated to me. This is before, you know, by the time we get into like the early mid 80s, stuff starts going a little over the top, and a lot of those records don't sound good today, but this is just a good, solid, right up the middle, good sounding record. I can hear all the instruments. It's got a lot of energy and warmth and punch to it. Produced by Roy Thomas Baker, who produced a lot of people, most notably Queen. He was involved in a ton of the Queen albums, and man, there was just a whole bunch of hits off of this record. You've got Good Times Roll. I always loved the vibe and the feel of that. My Best Friend's Girl. Just great melodic rock, just what I needed. Another great melodic rock song. I'm in Touch with Your World. Maybe that one didn't get played on the radio, but it has kind of this quirky weirdness to it, like maybe something we would hear from the Talking Heads. Don't You Stop. You know, that's got kind of a new wave vibe that, you know, bands like the Go-Go's and those kind of 80s bands would lock in on stuff like that. Maybe not my favorite song on the record. You're All I've Got Tonight, Open Sight 2, love that song. It's got a little bit of a heavier vibe to it, but the chorus in it is just fantastic. Bye Bye Love, great melodic rock. Moving in Stereo, love that song. I think that that's just so cool, the whole vibe of the song. And you know, what's interesting too about the Cars is sometimes people don't realize that Ric Ocasek, you know, he's considered the lead vocalist, but you also get Benjamin Orr, who plays bass. He sings a lot too, and so for instance, he sang "Bye Bye Love." He sings "Moving in Stereo." He sings the last song on the record here, "All Mixed Up," which is a pretty cool one, maybe a little bit forgettable, but "Moving in Stereo." Probably my favorite song on here, along with Good Times Roll, My Best Friend's Girl. I just love these songs that have this kind, it's got guitar in it, but it's got those old kind of 70s synth sounds in it, you know, where the synths are just adding some real, filling out the sound and adding some hooks and lines to the music. And man, this stuff is just so catchy. In fact, all right, I just realized this looking at the notes here. The first 3 songs on the record are all the exact same length. They're 3 minutes and 44 seconds. So this is just tight, to the point songwriting. As much as I love guitar solos and jamming and stuff like that, sometimes I'm just like I am right now. I'm just in the mood for some good melodic rock and some good, well-written, tightly focused songs, and that's what this kind of stuff is for me. Interestingly, the second side of record, everything is a little bit over 4 minutes. I don't know if that was intentional. Here you get the slightly longer songs. All the tracks are written by Ric Ocasek, except for Moving in Stereo, which has a co-write with Greg Hawkes, who is also the keyboard player in the band, you know, David Robinson on drums. And it's kind of interesting. Sometimes they use like the electronic synth drums for that era. And those sound a little dated, but it does kind of work because of the vibe that they're going for in some of these things. But when he's using real drums in here, these are the drum sounds on here are just fantastic. Benjamin Orr, I already mentioned his vocals. He's a very interesting bass player. Not doing anything super technical, but he does these cool little things that just really add to the song. Again, that's what this is all about for me when I listen to stuff like this. It's just stuff that, you know, everything is there to serve the song. Elliot Easton, lead guitar. Like a lot of cool little hooky guitar lines. And then, of course, we mentioned Rick Ocasek. He's on rhythm guitar and vocals. And he has sort of this cool, kind of weird voice, but it works. You know, it works in the music and it works in the song. So, all right. The Cars. Does anybody like this kind of stuff? I mean, again, I have a soft spot for this. I think it's because of my age. You know, grew up with when MTV first came out, so a lot of this kind of new wave stuff. When I was younger, it had to have a certain amount of guitar in it for me to really get into it, and this had enough guitar in it for me to enjoy it, and then just the great songs took it the rest of the way. So, what do you guys think? The Cars, their first album, really after this. The albums after this, they're kind of Candy-O. That one's okay, but none of them are as good as this. This is just like top to bottom. Every song on this record is just fantastic. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Till we see you again, rock hard, ride free.